The Galactic Empire had not known true fear for so long that the concept had become ceremonial rather than practical. Its borders stretched across thousands of systems, each one catalogued, taxed, and subdued by doctrine refined over millennia. Empires rose, resisted, and vanished, all following patterns the Empire understood with mathematical certainty. Victory was no longer an event but an expectation. Imperial fleets existed less for war and more for reassurance, symbols of a dominance so absolute that most civilizations surrendered long before the first shot was fired. Strategy manuals had not changed in centuries because nothing had required them to change. At the heart of this order sat the High Command, where admirals studied star charts with detached precision. Threat assessments were routine, dull, and repetitive. Pirate incursions. Minor rebellions. Trade disputes resolved by the mere announcement of an Imperial patrol entering a system. The galaxy behaved because it had learned to. Among the countless species indexed by the Empire, humans occupied a forgotten corner of the archives. A young species from an unremarkable spiral arm, biologically fragile, politically divided, technologically inconsistent. Long-range observation had once classified them as volatile but self-limiting, prone to internal conflict rather than expansion. They were not conquered because conquest was unnecessary. Isolation achieved the same result more efficiently. The Empire simply watched as humanity fractured, rebuilt, and fractured again. Eventually, observation was deemed a waste of resources. Humans were downgraded to a non-priority civilization and removed from strategic models. That decision became doctrine. Doctrine became assumption. Assumption hardened into certainty. Imperial history taught that civilizations either expanded aggressively or collapsed inward. There was no third path. Species that survived did so by imitation, copying superior technologies until they became manageable vassals. Species that did not were forgotten. Humanity, according to every projection, belonged to the latter category. So when the border monitoring arrays reported nothing unusual for decades, no one questioned it. Silence was normal. Stability was proof of success. The Empire measured peace not by harmony, but by the absence of resistance. The military command structure reflected this confidence. Fleets were distributed for control, not defense. Weapons systems were calibrated for overwhelming response, not adaptability. There was no incentive to innovate when every potential enemy behaved exactly as predicted. The Empire believed it had mapped the limits of intelligence itself. Physics had boundaries. Strategy had ceilings. Progress slowed naturally once perfection was achieved. Anything beyond that was theoretical fantasy, useful only for academic debate. This belief was not arrogance in their view. It was experience. Thousands of wars had taught them that the universe rewarded strength, speed, and uniformity. Deviations were crushed. Outliers corrected themselves or vanished. Even the Empire's censors reflected this philosophy. They searched for known signatures, known threats, known behaviors. Anything that did not fit was filtered out as noise, anomaly, or error. Reality, after all, had proven reliable for centuries. When the first irregular data point appeared at the edge of Imperial space, it was logged automatically and ignored. A minor fluctuation. A transient distortion. The kind that resolved itself once instruments recalibrated. No alert was issued. No commander was notified. The Empire did not panic because there was, by definition, nothing left to fear. The fluctuation returned less than a standard cycle later, no longer subtle, no longer ignorable. Border arrays recalibrated themselves repeatedly, each pass confirming the same result. A mass signature had appeared where no transit corridor existed. It had not crossed into Imperial space. It had simply arrived. Technicians assumed sensor bleed or corrupted telemetry. Backup systems disagreed. Independent stations confirmed identical readings, synchronized to a margin that ruled out coincidence. Something occupied the void beyond the border, stationary and immense, yet producing no conventional emissions. Imperial analysts compared the data against known vessels. The profile matched nothing. Not warship, not station, not stellar phenomenon. Its silhouette defied classification, either symmetrical nor chaotic, as if designed without regard for established engineering logic. More unsettling was its silence. No propulsion wake. No energy bleed. No communication burst. It neither announced itself nor concealed itself. It existed, unapologetically, like a question placed directly into Imperial space. Command protocols escalated automatically. Observation priority increased. Targeting arrays aligned out of habit rather than intent. Even then, firing solutions refused to stabilize. Predictive algorithms failed to project movement because the object did not behave like something that intended to move. Moments later, the impossible occurred again. The object adjusted position without acceleration. Distance changed, yet velocity readings remained at zero. Several officers accused the instruments of malfunction. Others said nothing, watching equations collapse into contradictions. The Empire prided itself on understanding physics well enough to weaponize it. This thing treated physics as optional. Attempts to hail the object followed procedure. Imperial codes transmitted across multiple spectrums, layered with authority and threat. The response was uniform absence. Not rejection. Not interference. Indifference. A review of forbidden archives was quietly authorized. Records of abandoned civilizations, sealed research, theoretical propulsion models dismissed as impractical. One analyst, older than most doctrines, requested access to pre-isolation human data. That request raised questions. Human records were outdated, fragmented, and dismissive. Their technology was decades behind even minor Imperial clients. Yet certain annotations stood out, buried beneath condescension. Notes about unpredictability. Rapid adaptation. Systems built redundantly rather than efficiently. As data streams converged, a disturbing pattern emerged. The object's mass-to-energy ratio resembled no Empire design philosophy. It was inefficient by Imperial standards, layered, reinforced, excessive. Built not for elegance, but survival. The object turned. No thrusters ignited. No reaction force registered. It simply reoriented, aligning itself directly toward Imperial space, toward the core worlds, toward the heart of authority. The movement was slow, deliberate, unmistakably intentional. For the first time in centuries, an Imperial commander delayed issuing an order. Confirmation arrived from a deep spectrum scan, refined beyond standard parameters. Trace elements in the hull composition matched archive samples from a forgotten classification. A species once deemed incapable of interstellar threat. The designation appeared on the central display, stripped of context, stripped of judgment. Human. The room fell silent, not from disbelief, but from something colder. If this was human, then everything the Empire believed about limits was wrong. Doctrine demanded retaliation, yet instinct hesitated. The Empire had catalogued fear in others, never in itself. Now uncertainty spread faster than any alarm. Calculations could not explain arrival without transit, movement without force, presence without provocation. Whatever humanity had become, it had surpassed observation and entered confrontation without aggression. The object remained motionless, patient, as if waiting for comprehension to catch up. Somewhere within Imperial command, an unspoken realization formed. This encounter was not an invasion, not a challenge, but an announcement. Humanity had crossed a threshold unseen, and the Empire had been standing on the wrong side of history, confident, unprepared, and suddenly very small. It understood then that dominance built on certainty collapses fastest when certainty fails, and that the silence facing them was not ignorance, but restraint earned through strength they could no longer measure. That realization marked the beginning of fear for an empire that forgotten how feel it. Imperial command fractured quietly. No alarms sounded, no public declarations were made, yet authority thinned in the space between decisions. Orders were issued, revised, then suspended as new data erased the logic behind the last. The Empire had always relied on certainty as a stabilizing force. Now certainty refused to exist. Emergency councils convened under the guise of routine briefings. Advisors spoke carefully, aware that language itself could provoke consequences. The human vessel did not advance, did not retreat, did not react to surveillance escalation. It remained fixed at the border, neither threatening nor respectful, a presence that demanded interpretation rather than response. Long-range analysis deepened the unease. The ship's internal structure appeared layered far beyond necessity, compartmentalized to an extreme degree. Systems overlapped redundantly, not to optimize performance, but to guarantee function under catastrophic failure. Imperial engineers found the philosophy alien. Empire's ships were designed to dominate quickly or not at all. This vessel was designed to endure. Weapons targeting was attempted again, this time through manual override. Fire control officers reported inconsistent lock states, as if the ship existed in multiple probability sets simultaneously. No jamming signal was detected. The targeting system simply could not decide where the ship would be when a weapon arrived. A single probe was authorized, launched at minimal yield, framed officially as a calibration test. The probe never reached the ship. Its telemetry cut out mid-transmission, not violently, not disrupted, but cleanly, as though the space it entered no longer permitted signals to leave. That result ended debate. Archived projections were reopened, including those marked obsolete. Humanity's development curve was recalculated using corrected assumptions. Analysts realized the original error had been conceptual, not technical. Humans had not optimized for expansion or conquest. They had optimized for survival under uncertainty. Isolation had not weakened them. It had refined them. The human vessel finally transmitted a signal. It was narrowband, unencrypted, and uncompressed, carrying no attempt at intimidation. The message did not identify a rank, a government, or a demand. It identified intent. It stated that humanity had observed the Empire for generations. That patterns of dominance were predictable. That empires rose, enforced order, and collapsed when order became rigidity. Humanity had chosen not to intervene until observation was complete. The message explained that this ship was not a war asset. It was a boundary instrument. A marker. Imperial linguists fixated on a single phrase repeated with deliberate precision. Humanity did not seek conflict. Humanity sought acknowledgement. The implications struck harder than any threat. If this vessel was not a weapon, then weapons were unnecessary. If this was a marker, then others existed elsewhere, unseen but present. Further scans confirmed it. Distortions similar to the first anomaly appeared briefly across distant sectors, then vanished, as if confirming receipt. Humanity was not announcing itself to the Empire alone. It was signaling the galaxy. Within the High Command, fear took shape not as panic, but as understanding. The Empire's greatest advantage had always been speed of conquest. Humanity had inverted the equation. It had waited until conquest was irrelevant. The Empire realized it was no longer the observer. It was the subject of evaluation. Military escalation plans were shelved. Not from mercy, but from futility. Every scenario involving force ended with unacceptable unknowns. Humanity had not revealed strength, yet everything about the encounter implied overwhelming restraint. The ship remained at the border, silent once more, patient, unchallenged. For the first time in Imperial history, power was measured not by fleets, but by the ability to choose not to use them. The Empire, vast and ancient, confronted a truth it had never prepared for. It had mastered domination, but humanity had mastered time. That understanding settled into command like a verdict, final and inescapable. The next transmission carried weight beyond its data volume. It arrived without escalation, without urgency, yet Imperial systems prioritized it instinctively, as if recognizing authority before being told to. The message originated from the same vessel, unchanged in position, unchanged in posture. Humanity was still not advancing. The signal clarified what the Empire had failed to imagine. Humanity had not been isolated by weakness, nor protected by chance. It had withdrawn deliberately, not to hide, but to learn without interference. While the Empire expanded outward, humanity had turned inward, studying collapse, resilience, and extinction across recorded history, including their own. They spoke of early mistakes, of believing speed equaled progress and power guaranteed safety. Those beliefs had nearly destroyed them. Survival came only when they abandoned dominance as a goal and replaced it with continuity. Humanity rebuilt its civilization around redundancy, decentralization, and adaptation under failure. No system was irreplaceable. No authority was absolute. Collapse had been rehearsed until it lost meaning. The ship at the border was described as an emissary, but not in the imperial sense. It carried no leader, no single command hierarchy. Decisions aboard were distributed, layered, and reversible. The Empire understood then why targeting failed. There was no center to destroy. Humanity explained its technology without pride. Efficiency had been sacrificed intentionally. Excess mass was protection. Overlapping systems were not waste, but insurance against unknown futures. Where the Empire refined weapons to end wars quickly, humans refined endurance to outlast wars entirely. They acknowledged imperial dominance openly, neither challenging nor flattering it. They recognized the Empire's achievements, its order, its reach. Then came the quiet correction. Order without flexibility becomes fragility. Control without empathy invites resistance. Empires fall not from invasion, but from internal inability to change. The message stated that humanity had reached a point where extinction was no longer an acceptable risk. Any civilization capable of reshaping entire regions of space, intentionally or otherwise, was now within humanity's responsibility to monitor. Not to rule. To prevent irreversible outcomes. The ship was not a threat because threats require escalation. It was a presence because presence alters behavior without force. Humanity had learned that lesson the hard way. Imperial Command searched the transmission for ultimatums and found none. There were no demands, no deadlines, no concessions requested. Only a declaration of coexistence under observation. Humanity was entering the galactic stage not as a conqueror, but as a stabilizing constant. They offered a choice, framed without moral superiority. The Empire could continue unchanged, and humanity would remain distant but vigilant. Or the Empire could adapt, reforming its expansion doctrines towards sustainability rather than domination, and humanity would assist where requested. The absence of threat was the most unsettling element. Humanity was confident enough not to need one. Analysts noted that the message was broadcast deliberately without encryption. It was meant to be intercepted, shared, discussed. Humanity was not speaking only to the Empire. It was speaking to history. As the transmission ended, Imperial leadership confronted an unfamiliar position. They were no longer the ultimate authority defining the future of the galaxy. Another civilization had arrived, not seeking permission, not demanding submission, but establishing a boundary of responsibility beyond which unchecked power would not pass. The ship remained motionless, unchanged, its purpose fulfilled without movement. Humanity had spoken, not to intimidate, but to clarify. Strength had been demonstrated without spectacle. Intent without aggression. The Empire understood then that the balance of power had shifted without a single weapon firing. Humanity had not challenged the Empire's rule. It had redefined the terms under which rule could exist. And in that redefinition, dominance became obsolete. The Empire did not issue proclamations or victories after the transmission ended. It did something far more unprecedented. It paused. Fleets remained where they were, not advancing, not retreating, awaiting orders that no longer arrived automatically. Across Imperial space, governors delayed expansion schedules, patrol routes were rewritten, and long-standing assumptions quietly expired. The galaxy noticed the change immediately. When an empire defined by momentum chose stillness, speculation replaced fear, and silence carried more weight than conquest ever had. Records of the encounter spread despite attempts at containment. Traders whispered, diplomats recalculated, and smaller powers adjusted their behavior with sudden caution. Humanity's appearance reframed every hierarchy. Civilizations once constrained by imperial certainty now questioned whether inevitability truly existed. The Empire's authority had not vanished, but it had been contextualized, placed alongside another force that did not need permission to matter. Humanity did not remain to supervise the aftermath. The vessel withdrew the same way it had arrived, without acceleration, without farewell, leaving behind only confirmation that withdrawal itself was a choice. Imperial sensors detected no pursuit fleet, no defensive line, no territorial claim. Humanity had made its point and departed, confident that awareness alone would alter outcomes more reliably than occupation. In the cycles that followed, imperial doctrine evolved for the first time in recorded history. Expansion quotas were reduced. Subject worlds were granted autonomy once deemed inefficient. Military resources shifted from suppression to stabilization. These changes were not announced as reform, but survival. The Empire understood that strength measured only by control invited eventual collapse, and collapse was no longer acceptable. Across the wider galaxy, humanity's presence became a constant variable rather than a visible empire. Trade routes stabilized without enforcement. Conflicts de-escalated before ignition. Not because humanity intervened, but because everyone knew it could. Power structures adjusted around that knowledge, bending rather than breaking. Humanity had introduced a ceiling to ambition, invisible yet absolute. The Empire archived the encounter under a new classification, one it had never used before. Not enemy. Not ally. Equal was insufficient. The final designation translated imperfectly into imperial language, but its meaning was clear. Humanity was recorded as a civilizational constant, a species that had survived itself and chosen responsibility over dominion. The Empire endured, but it would never again stand alone at the top of history. It was later understood that the true shock was not technological disparity, but philosophical divergence. The Empire had mastered conquest, logistics, and obedience, yet humanity had mastered restraint. By refusing spectacle, by declining to dominate, humanity forced every power to confront its own trajectory. The lesson was unavoidable. Survival was not guaranteed by superiority alone, but by the willingness to change before change was forced. Generations later, imperial scholars would debate whether humanity saved the galaxy or merely delayed its next collapse. No consensus formed. What endured was the memory of a moment when certainty failed and something stronger replaced it. Humanity did not claim the future. It ensured one existed. For an empire built on inevitability, that distinction changed everything. And so the Empire continued, altered but intact, aware now that power unseen could be more decisive than power displayed. Somewhere beyond perception, humanity watched, not as rulers, not as judges, but as stewards of a lesson learned at great cost. The galaxy moved forward under a new understanding. The strongest civilization was not the one that conquered the stars, but the one that learned how not to burn them. That understanding endured long after the human vessel vanished from record, shaping decisions quietly, persistently, without enforcement. The Empire never admitted fear, but it adopted humility, a trait once dismissed as weakness. In doing so, it survived an era that might have ended it. Humanity never returned openly, because it did not need to. Its influence had already taken hold. The Empire endured, the galaxy adjusted, and humanity remained unseen, ensuring the future without demanding credit.